Good morning, Chi-Chi. Today is July the 7th, 2025, and I am driving to work, and I had a second to make a video for you. We went to church this weekend. We've been visiting a church called Trinity Lutheran Church. Very welcoming church, very loving church. Appreciate Pastor Corey. Seems like a very humble guy, and he, a really vulnerable guy too. Very willing to, be open to what Christ has done for him, and that's a tough thing to open and acknowledge because Christ can rescue you from some pretty deep hells. But I was thinking about it, and we started going to Grace Auburn. And we're still, technically going there. If everybody's tired or just, not kind of feeling up to going. And, understandably, Mama's pregnant with baby number 2. I just decided that, if I'm having trouble getting people going, I'm just going to go to that 8 o'clock, and I'm going to just take who I can with me, and I take you with me. And there are reasons I enjoy taking you to Trinity Lutheran that, Grace Auburn doesn't have. But a couple things I was thinking about with it, I don't want you to fall into, and it's stuff I've fallen into before. Probably the first one is the first thing I fall into is being real judgy with churches. Never be judgy with churches. Don't nitpick and be like, oh, I don't like the worship, or I don't like this, or I don't like this. Church is not, about you, in that sense. Church is about bringing yourself before God. Church is about being willing to accept what God is trying to give you. There's a sense of worship to God, a distinct adoration that is reserved for Him. And so it's really more about trying to understand what that is. There are some bold churches out there that say that, they're the one true church. And you can be cocky about it, but also, it's a very serious, bold claim to say that you've got, everything, in its proper place. But even there still, don't be judgy with them. You don't have to agree with them. God's entrusted you with your life on that, and you have to decide, what you're on board with and what you're not on board with. And, not let anybody push you around, obviously. That's getting into the second thing probably I was getting at. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church that was, lots of, brimstone, hellfire. You're going to hell unless you believe in Jesus. And that was kind of the sole point. They didn't really, or I felt like they didn't do a good job, just getting you on board with Jesus and then trying to help you mature in that. It was just a place of just questioning your faith all the time. Ultimately, what you think. You know where your relationship with Jesus is. And, even if there's a period like you just genuinely don't have one, it's better to just be honest about that. And, if you just don't believe it, it's better to be honest about it than, try to fake anything. It's better to take ownership of the information and make it your own and wrestle with it and want to engage with it, because there is realness to Jesus, and there's realness to bringing you to a place where you can truly walk with God. That's a whole subject in and of itself. but it can bring you back to a place of finding joy with work, finding peace with your life. So don't let people bully you around with it. Don't be afraid to try to engage and take ownership of the information. So the first point, again, just being, the first point being that, don't be judgy. Don't think that, you have all the answers. Just take ownership of, what is on the table with you, and just be honest about it. And then the second thing is, don't let people bully you around and thinking that, you're going to believe this or that or whatnot. But probably thirdly too, also, I'm living evidence that, there's truth with it. So the third thing would be, there's truth with it. So seek the truth with it. Take ownership of the information, because if you realize that it works different than what you were before, you have to change things. Don't be afraid to change things. The end goal is to be closer with God and to pursue God and to love God. So don't be afraid to seek truth. Don't be afraid of change. These are things that I work with and deal with, and it's one of those things where there's a Catholic apologist named Trent Horn, and Catholics are kind of in that group where they believe they have the one true church, and anything outside of that's technically not the church. You can think what you want on that. Again, don't be judgy with it. And, I'm not on board with everything Catholics believe, and that's okay. Because, I'm genuinely, seeking the truth, and I have to trust that Jesus is going to help me arrive there. But the reason I bring him up is he looks at it as not like, kind of like, oh, we have the one true church, so you have to follow us, or else, kind of like fear thing. It's more like, this is the way things are. This is the truth. This is where we stake our flag, and this is what we have in common, and this is what we don't have in common. And looks at it more like that. I'm glad you're doing 2 things right, but you could be doing 3 things right. This one thing, we don't agree on that, but it's a good thing we're doing these 2 things right together. Kind of perspective, instead of kind of holding it over your head. Anyway, I was just thinking about that a little bit. And it's something that is on my mind a good bit. Not just for, well, it is for me, but because I'm responsible for you too. I need to, I want to let you see Jesus in the truest sense possible. And so it's something that I'm working towards. I'm not doing a perfect job, and I wouldn't expect that I possibly could. The thing I want to do is let you see Jesus as much as possible. I love you so much.